right, so it's 6:35. So welcome everyone to Teaching Tuesdays, brought to you by Multifamily Passive Cash Flow for Life, or just Passive Cash Flow for Life overall. For those of you that have been here before, welcome back. And for anybody that is new or is joining us on YouTube, a little background for you. So Nicheole Amundsen, that's our speaker tonight, actually started investing in commercial real estate about 25 years ago and done very, very well. And about 12 years ago, she started a course. And then about 8 years ago, I took the course and it's life-changing. And so we're here to kind of share information with you for two reasons. One, it's obviously an opportunity for us to give back, which is obviously very, very important. And two, we'll hope you'll find something that is valuable enough for you that you decide, you know something, this makes a lot of sense. I like these guys. Let me go ahead and take the Passive Cash Flow for Life course and get involved in the Passive Cash Flow for Life community where you can partner and meet people and raise money and get advice and all sorts of things like that. So I'm going to pass it over to Nicheole.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it, James.
Mhm.
So tonight we're going to talk about options. In your using options in your investing in your real estate strategies. And they can be used for both on the buying side and on the selling side. And so what I want to sort of start out with is just kind of a couple of things. Number one, I think options are an incredibly powerful tool. It's amazing what you can do with options. They're also only limited by your imagination, just like a lot of real estate investment strategies. There is kind of so many things you can do with options. Is it my goal in the next half an hour, 40 minutes, is to just kind of introduce you to some things to begin to think about. And then I have just a couple of kind of examples to think about here towards the end. And then if any of you have any deals that you kind of just know there's a deal there, but can't figure out how to make it work, we may be able to talk if there's a way to make that work with an option. And so none of this is going to go real deep into options because I just don't have time. But let me do say that that what you can do with them is pretty darn amazing. They are a tool that I think everybody should have in their backpack or their toolbox or whatever you want to call it. So let's kind of go from there. So I'm going to try and just kind of give an overview of what you can do in general with options, the type of options there are. So if we remember, an option is the right to do something. You have an option to do it, but you are not required to do it, which again gives you a lot of power. So there are buying options, there are selling options, there are options to list a property, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit more, particularly if you're a realtor. There are buyback options. There are options to hold for a time before you make a decision. There are options to buy when a certain something occurs. There are options where the first part of it is you lease, and then if somebody manages the lease, they have the option to buy. A really common type of option is the option to develop. And so you'll have an option to buy a piece of land. And then while you have that option to develop the land, they're typically also associated with an exclusive right to list that piece of property to try and get it sold or to bring in a developer so that you have the right to commit that option that you have to develop. You have the option to commit that piece of property to a developer. There are options to to develop that relate around if somebody can get the first part of a development put together, which are the permissions and the architecture, then if somebody does that, you will step in with an option to actually develop it. There are broker options or options that brokers could use. If you actually think about most real estate contracts are not truly a contract, they are an option to buy. So the reason I'm saying that is that a lot of times our real estate contracts have clauses where we can get out. That if this doesn't happen, I have the option to not buy this. So if the financing isn't to my way of liking, I don't have to buy. If I can't do this or I can't do that, then I have the option to not buy. So in truth, most real estate contracts are options. And what we need to do in those real estate contracts is make sure it's clear what our get out of jail free card is that would allow us to have the option to buy it, but not the requirement. So there are just so many things you can do with an option. James, are you not letting this my pain in?
No, not right now. We got a message out to them. We're not really sure. We're a little
Okay,
cautious.
gotcha.
Okay.
It just keeps flashing on my screen. It's which
Yeah,
why I was asking.
sorry.
That's okay. So what I wanted to talk about here a little bit is that what goes into an option. And I think this is more important than most of us think because you can play any role in this. So you can be the optionee, which is you want to buy something. You can be the optionor, which is to sell something. So I don't know which is the more common, but both are, so you can play any role in this. You just have to think about what are the things that you would like to see happen in this. So what are the if you are going to be the option or you're going to try and sell something, what are the criteria you are going to use so that the seller needs to know about so that they can execute on the option? If you are the optionee, so you're the buyer, what are the things that you need to have in that option contract so that you can have this, get out of this if you want, execute it if you want. So I'm going to sort of, because you can use options in all sorts of things. I have some kind of real estate stories that are kind of interesting, but you can also option cars, you can option to buy all sorts of things. You can, option to put money into an IRA. You can option with an insurance type of an insurance contracts. So there are just all sorts of things you can do, but we're going to try and talk about real estate here. So like any contract, it is an agreement between a buyer and a seller. It gives the optionee or the optionor, depending on what role you're playing, the right to buy or sell within a specific time frame for a fixed price, regardless of the market conditions. So I would also say a lot of them have other kinds of specificity in them, right? But make sure that your contract, your option contract, has all of those things in it. It has the right to sell, but you're not required to sell. It has a time frame in it. It has a price. Now, typically with option contracts, there has to be some kind of numeration to make sure the contract is valid, just like there is in a real estate contract. But there is also a timeline for how long this option lasts. And so you need to make sure that most are there, right? And you need to have some kind of a price or terms in this. So when you set this, so that it is, the terms under which you are willing to buy this. So there are also there are payments that are paid to the buyer to keep a property off the market for a while, right? Or to give the optionee the right of first refusal, or to have the option in place for a certain amount of time so you can go see what you can do with it. But one of the things that you are needing to make sure is that the contract is going to say who's in control. So a lot of time it's the optionee, but it can also be the optionor is in control of the deal in some way and for a specific period of time. All right. The other part with an option, and I'm going to talk more about this in just a couple minutes, is that it has to have a time frame in which you exercise the option. One of the things that frequently makes that causes options to go bad is that people don't pay attention to that time frame, the time within an option, particularly those that may have a kind of a longer time period. So a lot of options are for 2 or 3 days, and so they kind of stick with your mind. But I've done options for 2, 3, 5 years. And you have to have a way of understanding where and keeping track of when that option's going to expire. So you decide if you are going to execute it or not. All right. So feel free to interrupt anytime if you got questions. Okay. So I want to talk here for just a couple of minutes of things that you kind of need to be aware of with an option. If you are the seller, particularly in a lot of real estate contracts, you need 2 documents. So think one of the most common ones is a lease option, right? And the lease, you don't want to have, if you are the seller in this, you don't want to have just one contract. You need a lease contract, and then you need a contract for option, not an option contract. I'm going to come back to that. But that is incredibly important. And I'm going to talk to you about why, about this in just a minute. And they're separate documents. If you are the optionee, in other words, you are selling this to somebody else, right? Or you are trying to buy something, I'm sorry. What you want is as much time as possible, and you need to record it. So let's kind of come back up to this first one. Why am I saying you need a contract for option rather than an option contract? So there has been a lot, and I'm not sure a lot. There's been quite a number of cases through the courts that say that if you have a lease with an option, and so an option contract, that those people who have the lease with the option have an equitable interest in the property. And in other words, they have a right to that property. And instead of being able to go to eviction court, you are now talking about foreclosures. The other thing that gets in the way of this is that if you have an option contract, a lease with an option contract, one document or even two documents, and you're calling it an option contract, then that triggers some of the oh gosh, I'm having an Alzheimer's moment. What is the Dodd-Frank Act that says you can only do so many sales per year without kind of getting mixed up in all of this. So what actually is a contract for option? What that actually says is what it is. It's a contract that says if you do everything that is laid out in the lease for a certain period of time that's laid out wherever, then we will give you an option to buy. So you are not giving somebody an actual option to buy. You are giving them a contract for option. And that contract for option says, before I allow you to buy, you have to meet all of the criteria in the lease for at least 12 months, 24 months, whatever it is. In things like where you are like doing a rent for equity or an equity sale, like kind of a where people have to do a certain amount, they're earning some equity by doing something, that in the lease contract, you lay out what they have to do and by when, so that they have to do some fix up of the property before you are going to give them an option to buy. So let me stop there and ask if anybody has any questions about the difference between a straight up option contract and a contract for option. Okay. If there's a place to take notes and put this into your long-term memory, this is it. This is an important one. Okay. So now you are in the other position and you are the optionee. So you have a property and you are trying to get an option to buy a certain piece of property over a certain period of time. You need to make sure that you have as much time as possible. And remember, an option, I mean, it's a legal document, but people have been known to go around options a lot. And so if you have somebody that isn't straight up honest all the time, they can go ahead and sell that property out from under you, even though you have a contract that's an option contract to buy it. So how do we get around that? We do that by making sure we always record our options on that property. So that means we have to have evidence that whoever we were doing that option with actually owns that property or has control of that property. And like a real estate contract, if you only have one person signing that option contract with you, and there are three owners, it doesn't carry a lot of weight, right? But what we do is we record the option, and we record it as a mortgage to secure the option. And that word mortgage is important in this. And the reason it's important is that there are quite a number of counties, jurisdictions that don't want to record anything in their land records if it's not something they don't recognize. Everybody recognizes a mortgage. So we're going to do a mortgage to secure the option. And so if your option is to buy this house within the next year, I'm making this up, for $340,000, then your mortgage to secure that option is $340,000 because that's what you've agreed to buy it at. Does that make sense to everybody? If you don't, let me know. You need to have that because most jurisdictions will not record something that isn't an original still. So you need to have that notarized, and you probably need to have more than one notarized. So you can give one to the land records and you can keep one, and you probably give one to the other party as well, right? So those are two kind of critical things. The next thing I would say is that if you can do an option in an IRA, I would say that that is a preferable way to do a lot of these options, particularly those that have a longer time period. But also, so there's a lot of people who tend to have been told out there that you have like you wholesale a property. So you put $20 down, $50 down, $100 down, whatever it is, to get a contract to buy that property. So that's your earnest money, right? And that money is then used when you sell that wholesale that purchase and sale contract to somebody else. You collect the wholesale fee. The issue to me is that there are a lot of jurisdictions that are starting to sort of say only people who are realtors have the right to wholesale a property, all right? Or that it other kinds of issues. So the issue of wholesaling is starting to come up because there's been a lot of people. This is my opinion. I'm not saying this is the truth. This is my opinion, is that there are a lot of people who have not really learned the craft and they offer way too much for that wholesale. And then they can't find somebody to buy that. And so that wholesale, that contract lapses. And there's been enough homeowners who have gotten burned with that there's some legal precedents that are starting to show up that sort of say you really can't do this. It really needs to be somebody who has a real estate license. But nobody is going after options. The other thing I would say is that the IRS is starting to hook on. So particularly in Roth IRAs, because you pay the tax in advance, and then you never have to pay tax again, that a lot of, well, there is some increased looking at IRAs when what you put in is $100 and what you get out is $5,000, right? As a wholesale. But if it's an option and you can hold it for a little while, then those seem to have not been on anybody's radar yet. So one of my answer to you, or my suggestion to you, is that if you're doing a lot of wholesaling, or you're wanting to build up somebody's IRA, that instead of doing wholesale, you look at doing an option. You can achieve the same thing particularly if the option is notarized, as you can with a wholesale contract. And you may not get into issues with realtors and stuff. But the real issue here is you need to know what in the heck you're doing before you make an offer on some property of what you can actually pay for it, where somebody's going to buy it back from you, going to buy that contract, because it truly isn't fair, in my opinion, to tell a homeowner that you're going to buy their property, and then you can't close on that, or you can't sell that to somebody else. That's just plain not fair to them. Okay, I think IRAs are great. So I've got a 12-year-old goddaughter, and we're doing a lot of kinds of things in her IRA, in her Roth IRA, and one of them is options. So you can have an option that turns around very quickly, like in 48 hours a week, like what you would do with a wholesale. But you can also do a long-term option where you have the option to buy this piece of property, and you give them $100 and you can buy it anytime in the next 2 years, right? Um, or you have an option that is, I'm interested in this and I have the right of first refusal. So if anybody else wants to buy this, they have to come through me, and I have the option to, I have the right to, before you can sell it to somebody else, to say, no, I really don't want this, right? I just said this in the last item before. You have to keep good track of these because you need to know when these options are going to be up, and you need to leave yourself enough time so that you can take care of that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some examples here. So let's say, you have, and I'm just making some of these up, although I actually did this with a couple of my properties in a town that was losing population, and it wasn't, and it still isn't a very good place. So I am going to, um, I'm going to get a property. So if I see a property in an area that I don't want, I'm sorry, this is not the option I was just talking about. This is something else. So you have something that comes across your desk that's in a C minus neighborhood or a D neighborhood, but it's a great deal, but you really don't want to buy in that area. So you're going to give the seller an option for you to be able to execute on this in 7 days, and you're going to give them $50 or $100. And then you're going to see if you can find anybody who actually buys in that area, and you're going to sell them your option contract, or you're going to let them buy your option contract from you, right? So it is a way to be able to, without getting in very much, to have a little time where you can actually go do this, where you don't have this actually under a purchase and sale agreement. You just have an option. You can sell your options just like you can sell a contract. So what about if you are in an area where there are lots and lots of rules and regulations that are out there, and it's driving you nuts, so you own a house there. So I'm actually thinking here in Baltimore City. You have a house that is driving you nuts because of all of the water bills, of all of the you have to have a lid on your trash can. You have all of these rules and regulations that you just don't want to deal with, all the bureaucracy, right? So what you can do So let's say you already own that house. So what you can do and what you really want is just out of that, right? For right now. So you can find somebody who likes that area. And let's say for kicks that you have $45,000 tied up in this. You can turn around and you can sell this option to somebody who lives in that area for $25,000, right? And they're going to give you $10,000 or $5,000, but you have the option to buy it back in 15 years for the same price you bought it at. So now they have 15 years where they are in control of it. They are going to be dealing with all the bureaucracy. You still own it, or you can sell it to them if that's you'd rather, right? But you have the option to buy it back in 15 years for the same $45,000. So in 15 years, you buy it back for $45,000, and now it's worth 100,000 or 150,000. And the person who bought it from you is out for basically $5,000 that they gave you. And they are paying anything you still owe on it. And they're collecting all the rents, right? And you have the option to buy it back. Okay. How about this one as an example? A homeowner who can't sell their house. This is typical of places like Florida and the Outer Banks and things like that, where they need to sell their house, but they really can't because of high interest rates and high insurance. So you're going to give them the option to buy it in the next 90 days, but it's a right of first refusal if they get another buyer in that time. So you're not asking them to take it off the market. You're just saying that I have the option to buy it in the next 90 days. And that gives you a while to see if you can figure out something you can do with this property that will pay the mortgage, that will pay the insurance and stuff like that, and still make you a little money. Now, in all of these, we're not going to pay them a whole bunch on the option. Okay. So the other thing you could do is that if you actually want to buy this, you can do an option to buy on a contract for deed. Remember, a contract for deed is that the deed stays with the seller until you have paid a certain amount, and then the deed comes to you. So your option is going to be something like, I will buy it for, this is on out on, kind of on the Outer Banks or something like that. I will buy this for $600,000 from you and pay all of the insurance and taxes, right? And I will make the mortgage payment and whatever. And I have the right. So my contract for deed, my option is for 10 years or for 5 years. But I'm not going to give you more than $2,000 or $3,000 to secure this option, because remember, they can't sell it and you're giving them the right of first refusal. The key here is that right of first refusal isn't for the 9 or 10 years. It is for 90 days. And after that, you have it, right? And that your contractor, your option says, I'm going to buy it for this. And my option is that I can buy it I have the option to execute on this up to 5 years from now for your current purchase price. So you're paying a little bit out with the bet that the value of this is going to go up, and that you can figure out a way where you can make some money on this. If you can't, you're out that $2,000 or $3,000. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right. So there's a couple of others here. Um, so whoops, I'm sorry. Oops. I'm going the wrong way. All right. So here are some things. These are actually things I've done a fair amount in my IRA. All right. So you have a property that needs a new roof, and the people who own the property can't afford it. So you are going to replace the roof, and that's your option price. And you have the right to buy it for this price. So this property is worth, let's say, 300,000, and the area is growing at 3% a year. So in 10 years, it's going to be worth 30% more, right? So you're going to put 10,000 in to put a new roof on, and that you are going to agree to pay them 290,000 because you're taking the cost of that roof off. And for that, you fixing their roof, you have the option to buy it starting in 5 years, starting in 10 years for this, because they don't want to move. So you're going to give them that time. Same thing with the leaky basement. What happens if you have somebody who really needs something fixed in their house, or there's something that they really want to sell it? They need something and they need some money, but they really can't sell their house. They've got a kid who's 16 and they're not going to graduate for 2 years. So you give them an option to buy that house for its current value, or 10% less than its current value, but you won't exercise the option until their last child is out of high school. You have the right to, you have somebody who's older, um, and kids are, this person is, and I'm making this up, and may sound kind of macabre to people, but somebody's in hospice, and you know that that person is going to, is towards the end of their life. And so you have, or even they're old like me, and they just can't live too much longer, right? And so you do an option with them that you will give them a certain amount of money, and that gives you the option to buy that house at the current value when they die. Your contract, if it is recorded, now you actually have the option to buy it, and you have a contract, and that avoids dealing with all these heirs who, each one of them wants something different. So there are things you can do like that. So here's an interesting one. What happens if you're a real estate broker or a realtor, and somebody just knows that they need to be able to sell this house for $400,000 because that's what they were selling for a year ago, but now you have increased in interest rates and insurance, and the house is worth 350,000. So you're a broker, and you give them an option that you will list it for $400,000. And if it doesn't sell within 6 months at that price or slightly less, you have the option to buy it at 300 or 325, whatever that is. So it's good enough that you are going to make out with that, right? So you are actually saying, I'm willing to pay you to list this house for you. I'm giving you this money, but in return, I want to be able, if this property doesn't sell, to be able to buy it. And what is the time you think it's reasonable for you to be able to sell it? All right. And I agree that I will buy it at 325. I can't remember what I said, $325,000 in 6 months if it doesn't sell. Master lease options in commercial. It means we're taking over all of the payments and paying all the bills. And we're basically leasing it. We have an option to buy it for a certain amount. And most of the time, our option fee is we're going to put so much into that property to try and bring it up. People who are landlords, right? And they have rental property and you want a long-term lease. So you say, I have some executive rentals and I want to buy this. I want to rent this house. I want a contract to rent it for the next 5 years. And I will pay everything and I will give you a certain amount every month. And isn't it fair that after 5 years, I have the option to buy it? And so you're agreeing to lease it for 5 years and then you have an option to buy it. Okay. In mobile home parks, I have an option to buy a home in a park. So in this case, I go to the owner of the park, not the owner of the homes. And I say, I want to buy any homes that are for sale in this park and be able to rent them out. But in return, I agree that I won't move this home and you will give me permission. You will be able to look at all the tenants. Most of the time, these park owners know if somebody needs to sell their property, needs to sell their home, right? And so you're just sort of, instead of working with, I'm not saying you don't work with a homeowner, but I'm saying a way to get into this, to get the park owner a reason to put you ahead of all these others. You have an option with them to buy any homes. So that's basically, I'm going to come back here and then we'll see if there's any questions that people have. I'm just reminding everybody that we have a course that's about 36 modules. It's about 60 hours that covers all parts of commercial investing, from finding the markets to acquisitions to raising private money to managing property managers and building and running a business that lasts. And if you're interested in that, send us an email to support@passivecashflowforlife.com. On the 29th of this month of June, we're going to do a 4-hour webinar on land trusts. And we're not talking about the basics of land trusts. I really think that there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And there's a lot of things that land trusts can do for people that they just don't know. And we're only going to charge you $49 for that. And you should look for the upcoming details of that. And the last thing is that we post all of our, these things, these classes are recorded and we post them on our YouTube channel. And that is our YouTube channel address. And the recording from this class should be up by the end of the week. So I'm going to come back here and see if there's any deals you want to discuss or any questions you have. And I'm going to stop the share so I can see everybody, and we'll just open it up to questions for a few minutes. Anybody? I know that was probably like a fire hose. So hopefully you got something out of it. Anybody have any deals you're having trouble with? Anything you want to talk about? Any questions?
I have a
Hi, Nicheole,
question
this
on.
is Freddie. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, no, I was just asking, so because I know a couple people who've done pretty much flip lands to developers. Probably
Okay.
they've used some of the strategies. So is that what I guess one would do now, just with maybe not so much cash up front, and then just do the entitlement and all that stuff, and then look for a seller?
So most of the time with an option, you have to, just like any contract, you have to have consideration to make it a legal contract, right? So you have to put something down. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. So but you are tying up a property in some way, shape, or form. So one of the things, so I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I'm going to add something. One of the things I've done not infrequently is with land, particularly if it's a piece of land that is on a road, if it is up for tax sale or tax lien, a lot of times you can get unimproved land for what the taxes are owed. So now you go buy that piece of property, and then you give somebody the option to buy it, because you're typically not in for that for more than the taxes are owed. And remember, you can sell, now you can offer them an option to buy it for a certain amount of money, but you are buying, you have to pay for whatever the back taxes are. A lot of times with property that you think are for development, you're going to tie up the land with an option to buy it. And then you're going to see if you can find a developer who's interested. That works pretty well for infill lots. And it's mezza for bigger pieces of property, unless the pieces of property is in the path of progress for people who are, so that's where the town is growing. It's growing out towards that piece of property. So I don't know if I answered that question, Freddie.
Yeah, pretty much. You covered it in a little extra too. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Sharon, you had a question?
Yes, I was gonna ask how often like especially the ones where you go and you update or fix somebody's house, put a new roof on for them, and you get an option to buy it in the future. How many times does that go completely to fruition, or does oftentimes the homeowner buy back that option? Is that kind of does that happen? Can they buy back the option and
It
take
depends
over
on
their-
what you put in the contract, that they can buy it back for what you put into it plus a certain amount, or you can do a hybrid, which is you can sort of say to somebody, look, I will fix this roof and it's going to cost $10,000. And I have the option to buy it back in 5 years, the property back in 5 years for, whatever it's worth today, right? Or in 10 years. But between now and then, you can pay me back this $10,000 at 10% interest over the next 5 years, and then we will cancel the option. But the key is going to be to make sure that's in the contract, and the contract has been filed. The contract is you have a mortgage to secure that option. So you can do almost anything you want. You just have to think about what the seller needs and wants. And if you're going to give them the ability to buy it back, then you need to sort of maybe make sure they can do that. Or you have the option, if they don't do that, to just buy the house for whatever price you agree on at a certain point. That answer that,
It does
Sharon?
make sense. Yes, thank you. I knew somebody that was doing options and they said that often, most of the time, but probably like 90% of the time, the people bought the option back somehow. And I wasn't sure exactly how that would go, but you did explain that. Thank you.
So you can put in the option contract that they can buy it back for a certain amount of money. So it's also a way that sometimes happens. So if you've ever done second mortgages, right? That you can take out a second mortgage, or you can buy a second mortgage as a note. And you just stick it in your IRA and you wait, but you have filed it as a mortgage. And so now when somebody wants to go sell that house, somebody's going to come in and look at kind of what's on the deed, and they're going to see your option, your mortgage for the option. And for them to be able to sell that house, they're going to have to buy your option back. So there's a lot of ways you can go about this. Is that maybe more what you were talking about, you think?
Oh, everything that you explained was that answered
Okay.
a lot.
Thank you, thank you. Other questions, folks?
I was just going to comment. Mike Rusicka has a couple of stories on the Academy about how he had done just that, recorded an option, and then, like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years later, he gets a call from a closing attorney going, "Hey, we don't know what this is." He explained it to him, and yes, I will remove my lien for whatever his profit was going to be at the time, 30, 40, 50 grand, or whatever it is, because I guess the original homeowner was trying to go around him. The other question I had was, I looked at a piece of property in Ellicott City ages ago that would have fit 25 townhouses, but I didn't know about, construction financing or, getting it approved by the county and stuff like that. So if you had that, I mean, down the street here, somebody picked up, I think, like 3 acres, and they built 75 townhouses all for lease, which is an interesting idea. How would you have put that deal together for the 25 houses? There was an older couple living in the house right on the main road. Not that it makes a difference, but how would you have put that deal together?
Well, a couple of things that occurs. Number one is that I would have done a longer term. I would have made sure my option was for at least 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can agree that I will every year to renew that option, I'll give them another $1,000. I'm just making that up, right?
Mm-hmm.
To hold it.
Right.
Because what you are typically going to need is you're going to need to find a developer.
Mm-hmm.
And the developer is going to, and so you are going to go into agreement because you have the option on this. And the first thing they're going to need to do is to spend some time and probably some money to see if they can get the permits to do that. So you typically have a year or two to get the architectural drawings and the permits and all that stuff done. And then it starts the development. So when I'm thinking about doing something like that, I need to have enough time that you can figure out if this is really a go, and that you can stay in control of that land. So at the end of whatever time, so it may be that they didn't want to move for 2 years. So you can't exercise the option for 2 years.
Right.
And so you spend the time finding somebody, and you have a recorded option. And so they can go ahead and get the architectural stuff done and stuff if they want. And then once that passes, they can develop it. And now you have some control because you have the option for the land, and you can sell them your option either initially or in 2 years or however, but you have enough time that you can work that deal a bit. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and knock on that door
Okay.
and see if they're interested. And then I'm going to call Ernie, and Ernie's going to be the developer. We're going to build 25 townhouses, and we're going to rent them for the going rate right now for a townhouse is about $4,000 a month up here. So you ready for that, Ernie? We good? Ernie fell out of his chair, I think.
Is Ernie still there?
I think he's still there. Maybe he's not paying attention. I'll send you the contact, Ernie.
Yeah, either he's not paying attention or he's just ignoring you.
A little bit of both, so that's funny.
The baby's
Um,
running around.
Oh, I think you guys have feedback between the two computers.
I think we have time for one more question, and then I'm going to turn it over to my partners.